Welcome, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a sealed file from 1780 out that gives us this just chilling intersection of medical malpractice, architectural collapse, massive financial ruin, and perhaps the most undeniable case of premature burial documented in the early history of the United States.
That's right. We are heading to Charleston, South Carolina in the fall of 1788 to investigate the tragedy of Madeline and Roderick Usher.
And this is so much more than just a sensational story. It's really a flashpoint, an event that directly led to some pretty necessary transitions in American science and law.
It really was, and to understand it fully, we are relying on an unusually rich stack of primary sources. We have the public narrative, the sensationalism and the eyewitness accounts, which were captured in the South Carolina Gazette and the Charleston Courier.
But the real power of this dive and what makes it so fascinating comes from what the public wasn't supposed to see. We have the confidential government secrets tucked away in the Attorney General's memo to the governor. And this memo, it details the ethical compromises and really a calculated cover-up.
And then there's the part that truly changed history. That was the inclusion of high-level scientific scrutiny from the North. We have the actual minutes from the Philadelphia College of Physicians detailing how the medical elite reacted to this and tried to establish nationwide protocols to make sure no one was ever buried alive again.
So our mission today is to narrate this story completely. We're going to detail every single element contained within these documents. We want to paint a complete picture of the catastrophe that struck Charleston in October and November of 1788, from, the smell of the damp foundation all the way to the microscopic analysis of blood cells.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting immediately with the shock on the morning of October 12th, when the Usher house first began to announce its doom.
The scene itself is just so important to set. We're not talking about some modest little cottage here.
No, not at all. This was the Cooper River Bluff Mansion, known locally and pretty colloquially as Usher's house. It was substantial.
Right, it had a history. It was formerly the winter seat of the prominent Sheaves family, a property with real status.
Exactly. And the Usher siblings, they were people of consequence. Roderick and Madeline were a gentleman and lady of independent fortune. They'd only just arrived in Charleston that August, leasing the mansion.
And they were there for health reasons, correct.
Uh-huh.
The sources say they sought the milder airs of Carolina on medical advice.
They did, which immediately signals to you that Madeline's malady was chronic and severe enough to warrant a major geographic move. This wasn't a minor illness.
So the first official news hits the Royal Gazette on October 12th, and it says Roderick's body was discovered early, very early, around 6 o'clock that morning.
And who found him?
It was the family's long-serving valet, which, that detail suggests a certain closeness, a certain intimacy with the family's private life.
Right, he would have known things. So he immediately summoned the coroner. He did. Dr. Archibald Thorne, who was the official coroner for St. Philip's and St. Michael's parishes.
And what was his initial finding?
Well, Dr. Thorne's initial medical pronouncement is, it's very telling for what it omits. He found Mr. Usher deceased of causes yet undetermined.
Undetermined.
Yes.
That just screams speculation, doesn't
It
it?
absolutely does, but he explicitly notes two things: extreme nervous agitation, and then, crucially, no outward wound.
So right away, this is pointing towards a death driven by psychological or internal causes. It's not a crime of violence. It's something else.
Something that immediately set the local gossips churning. You can just imagine.
And what about Madeline? She's really the focal point of the family's condition, even before her supposed death.
Well, at this point, Miss Madeline Usher was reported to be in a state of profound hysteria. She had already been confined to her bed for the past fortnight due to that chronic malady.
So she's already incredibly frail and isolated.
Exactly. And now, following her brother's sudden death, she remained under constant attendance. The Royal Gazette also confirms their northern ties, which is important for later. They were the last surviving issue of the late Elias Usher, a wealthy Philadelphia merchant.
So the logistics of death, they begin immediately. The initial plan was for an interment the following Friday.
Yes, at the Presbyterian burial ground on Meeting Street. But that was pending the coroner's final orders. It wasn't set in stone yet.
The whole city must have been gripped by this strange, awful tragedy involving these respectable, wealthy strangers whose house seemed to be, falling apart around them.
The public interest was immense, and even the local lore surrounding the property itself contributed to the atmosphere.
Oh, what was the lore?
The structure, having been built on ground reclaimed from a marshy inlet, was already rumored to emit a faint phosphorescence after rain near the northern wall.
A phosphorescence, so like a glowing.
A strange, swampy glow. So this supernatural layer was present from the very beginning, even before the real horror was revealed.
Wow. Okay, so now we have to turn to the critical witness. The only person who saw what actually happened on the night of October 11th.
Mr. Jonathan E. Dupin.
Tell us about him. The sources are pretty specific.
They are. He's described as a young factor of French Huguenot extraction and a recent graduate of the College of William and Mary. He was staying in the mansion as a guest.
But he wasn't just a casual visitor, was he? Their connection was more specific than that.
Much more. His connection to Roderick was intellectual. It was highly specific. They met at the Philosophical Society library, and they bonded over Roderick's esoteric knowledge of rare books.
What kind of books?
Oh, the really obscure stuff. Figures like Hermes Trismegistus, Swedenborg, and the Alchemists.
So deep, mystical, philosophical texts.
Exactly. And Dupin had arrived just days earlier on the 9th with the very scholarly purpose of annotating Roderick's collection. He was there to work.
He gave a couple of accounts, but the full, chilling narrative appeared a few days later in the Charleston Courier on the 17th.
And that's where we get the atmosphere of the house before the climax. He claimed the house already seemed to, and this is a quote, breathe timbers contracting, a hollow wind in passages where no window stood open.
It breathes. That's not a structural detail. That's a biological one. It suggests sentience.
It's an incredible description, and he only caught a single memorable glimpse of Madeline before her death.
Just one. What did he see?
He saw her gliding along the upper gallery with a taper in her hand, dressed entirely in white, a ghostly image.
And Roderick said something to him about her, didn't he?
He did, a chilling whispered description that stuck with Dupin. He said, "She is both corpse and custodian of our line."
Wow. Corpse and custodian. So he saw his sister not just as ill, but as the living embodiment of the family's decay.
Precisely. The end of the line, walking and breathing, for now.
And then came the fatal night, October 11th into the 12th.
Yes. Dupin was jolted awake near midnight, not by a crash or bang, but by a sound.
What kind of sound?
He describes it as a cry so sharp it might have split the tomb. That is just an unnerving sound. Something extreme, almost inhumanly high-pitched.
And then what happened?
Moments later, Roderick burst into Dupin's chamber, and he delivers this terrifying confession that changes everything.
A line that starts it all.
He cries, "We have put her living in the tomb." The sheer, unadulterated horror of this realization was instant and devastating for Roderick.
And there was another sound, wasn't there? Accompanying that scream and confession.
Yes, a specific sound that Dupin registered echoing through the masonry of the house itself. A low, dull noise, as of some immense shield falling.
An immense shield falling. So what do you think that was? The vault door, the coffin lid.
It could be the thick granite slab of the crypt, maybe the iron door itself, just shaking the entire foundation. It was a sound of finality, of something heavy and sealed being disturbed from within.
And it was all too much for Roderick.
Far too much. He staggered, clutched his breast, and dropped lifeless right there at Dupin's feet.
And at the same time, the house itself reacts.
It does. A sudden fissure, which had long been observed in the facade, widened perceptibly, and parts of the eastern wall began to give way shortly after dawn.
It's like the structural failure was mirroring the personal biological collapse of the Usher line.
Exactly. Flesh and stone failing in unison.
Let's just pause the midnight panic for a second and focus on the terrible decision that led to it.
Madeline's interment on October 11th.
Yes. What do we know about how that was handled?
We know the procedure was shockingly brief and, frankly, negligent. Dr. Thorne, the attending physician, listened for a heartbeat for, and the source says, perhaps 30 seconds.
30 seconds, that's it.
30 seconds. And then, satisfied by this unbelievably cursory check, he immediately shut the lid of the coffin.
That sounds less like a professional medical assessment and more like a rushed formality, especially given her known history of, these cataleptic states. Was this gross negligence even by 1788 standards?
Oh, absolutely. The medical standards were rapidly improving at this time. People were aware of catalepsy. They were terrified of it. Thorne's 30-second check demonstrates either a willful disregard for that or perhaps coercion by Roderick.
What do you mean?
Well, Roderick was already suffering from this intense nervous affliction. He may have pushed for it, wanting it to be over.
And Dupin, the layperson, he saw the error. He tried to stop it.
He did. He protested the speed of it all, but Roderick silenced him with, and this is another quote from Dupin, a look of such despair that contradiction died in my throat.
So Roderick was emotionally shattered, but compelled to proceed, maybe fulfilling some dark family rite or just trying to end what he thought was her suffering.
It's hard to say. But the location of the interment was critical.
Where was it?
A squat granite cell beneath the foundations, the family crypt. It wasn't in the churchyard, it was inside the house itself.
Yeah, as they're sealing it up?
As the mortar sealed the slab, Dupin swore he heard a faint sigh.
Sigh.
Just a whisper of one. But the workmen, unwilling to acknowledge the horror of what that might mean, they just dismissed it.
What did they say it was?
Merely the wind escaping through the masonry. It's always the wind.
Okay, so now we have to return to the climax of the night. Dupin is with Roderick. The house is groaning.
That's right. Dupin confirms midnight had scarcely passed when the air thickened as though the house inhaled.
Inhaled. Again, this personification of the mansion is so potent.
It is. And Roderick, now driven completely mad by his guilt, dragged Dupin to the window. He was searching for an external explanation, a storm, anything.
But there was no storm.
Dupin noted there was no storm cloud visible. Instead, he says the lightning seemed to writhe within the walls. The violent energy was internal to the structure.
And then came the sounds from below.
Yes. The sounds of breaking rose from the crypt.
Yeah.
First, the low cracking of the coffin splintering, and then the sound of the vault door itself being forced open.
This wasn't a quiet process. This was violent, furious.
This was egress, and then the vision that finally killed Roderick.
What did they see?
By a flash of light that Dupin says issued from the floorboards themselves, the doorway at the end of the hall framed Madeline's figure.
And the description.
Dupin's description is graphic. Her shroud was blood-soaked at the bosom, and her hair was in wild dissolution. She was a figure of absolute horror and vengeance.
She takes a step.
She took one step, a terrifyingly deliberate action. Her arms were outstretched, and she fell forward directly upon her brother.
And in that moment,
the synchronized deaths were achieved. Roderick, killed by sheer terror, and Madeline succumbing to what the text calls final exhaustion after her unimaginable ordeal.
And the house.
The end of the House of Usher was instant. It split from chimney to cellar, fulfilling their mutual doom.
How did Dupin get out?
He escaped narrowly. He had to scramble through a casement window as the stones rushed inward. He barely made it out alive.
And his analysis of what happened, of the structural collapse, he rejects all the normal explanations.
Completely. He says he knew the sounds of settling timber and wagons from his time on the James River plantations. He was familiar with old buildings. He called what he witnessed a concerted groan of madder beam, iron, and granite answering a summons.
Answering a summons. So he believes the house itself was complicit. It was an active participant.
That was his final chilling theory. He believed that certain families, isolated by generations of intermarriage, become resonant chambers for their own echo.
What does that even mean?
That eventually the family and the family home become one. Flesh and brick begin to vibrate to a pitch intolerable to mortality. And the House of Usher, he concludes, was exactly such an instrument. Its last chord had just been struck.
His terror was so profound that he didn't stick around for any kind of inquest, did he?
Not at all. He sailed for Le Havre on the Brutus the very next day.
And his reasoning?
He was convinced that memory travels faster than any ship. He needed to put an entire ocean between himself and the disaster he just witnessed.
So that's the public story, the sensational account from the lone survivor. But now we have to move into the back rooms.
We must. We now move from that almost Gothic public report to the cold, clinical, and politically calculated assessment prepared privately by Attorney General Edward Rutledge for Governor Pinckney.
And this is dated just a few days after October 15th.
Yes. And this document is absolutely crucial because it contains the facts that officials recognized as true, but actively decided to suppress.
So Rutledge's priority wasn't truth. It was
What?
public order.
It was maintaining public order and, more importantly, the reputation of the state of South Carolina. He needed to get ahead of this story before the panic could completely undermine local authority.
So let's get into the details of his memo.
Yeah.
What were the clinical findings on Roderick Usher?
Well, the memo confirms the physical state of Roderick. It gives his age, about 32, height, weight, but the important details confirm the trauma. There was no outward injury, but classic signs of intense distress.
Such as?
His conjunctivae were injected, that's the whites of his eyes being bloodshot. His tongue was slightly protruded, and his fingers were clenched, as if in spasm.
So a body contorted by a final, terrible shock.
Precisely. And the internal autopsy solidified the cause. His heart was found to be flaccid, and it contained a dark tarry clot. His brain vessels were unusually turgid.
So the official cause of death was?
Acute syncope. For you listening, acute syncope means sudden, extreme heart failure. It was almost certainly triggered by a massive shock.
Why, terror.
Exactly. It aligns perfectly with Dupin's account of Roderick seeing his sister and then dying on the spot.
No, the truly explosive content in this memo, the reason for the cover-up, concerns Madeline.
It does. The memo details her condition at the time of her first, demise. She was found in an advanced cataleptic state.
Catalepsy, that's the key medical term here. Can you break that down for us?
It's a neurological condition. It's characterized by a trance-like state, a loss of voluntary motion, and extreme muscle rigidity. Crucially, Rutledge reports that when she was found, her body was, and this is in bold in the memo, still warm.
Still warm, my God.
Her pulse was imperceptible, and her respiration was undetectable even when they used a mirror held up to her mouth. It was the perfect simulation of death.
And the burial decision. Was it rushed?
The memo confirms it. She was interred that same day in the family coffin without public notice.
And the death certificate?
It was signed by Dr. Thorne, who certified her demise by the archaic, almost poetic term, wasting of the spirit.
Wasting of the spirit. That sounds incredibly suspicious. It's not a medical diagnosis. It's a piece of folklore. It suggests Thorne was either rushed or coerced by Roderick's extreme state.
Or just wanted it off his hands. But the most damning evidence, the part that Rutledge labels nota bene, note well, proves the premature burial beyond any doubt.
What was it?
Rutledge recorded that her nail beds showed fresh blood, and the inner surface of the coffin lid bore scratches, consistent with frantic attempts to escape.
Scratches. Physical evidence of a struggle for life inside the tomb.
There's no other way to interpret it. And given this irrefutable proof, Rutledge, realizing the potential for criminal liability, immediately ordered a re-exhumation of the body.
But he did it quietly.
Very quietly, under quiet hours, as the memo says. He was desperately trying to control the evidence chain before the public found out.
So to build this cover-up, this plausible public narrative, Rutledge needed a mundane, objective cause for the house collapsing.
Right. The supernatural sympathetic resonance theory from Dupin wasn't going to fly. So he relied on an architect named Hugh Hext.
And what did Hext find?
Hext confirmed the known structural flaw. The eastern wall had separated along an old mortar channel that dated all the way back to the original 1724 construction.
So it was an old house with a known weakness.
Exactly. And Hext's official attribution for the final failure was hydraulic pressure from a forgotten cistern beneath the vault.
A forgotten cistern. How convenient.
Incredibly convenient. This places the blame squarely on poor infrastructure and environmental factors. It's clean. It's nobody's fault.
But Hext's report wasn't entirely clean, was it? There was an anomaly.
There was an anomaly he admitted he could not explain. And that was a simultaneous fall of the copper-sheathed roof lantern.
The lantern on the roof.
Yes. It descended entire, as though severed cleanly at the joists. This localized, sudden force, completely disconnected from a foundational cistern, it supports Dupin's claim of an instantaneous internal force overwhelming the structure. It doesn't fit the slow leak theory.
So Rutledge also investigated the family history, looking for some kind of constitutional explanation for what happened to the twins.
He did. He looked at the probate papers, which confirmed that the Ushers had intermarried within a single lineage since the reign of Charles II.
For generations.
And why? To ensure the estate and the name might remain indivisible. They kept the bloodline pure and the money in the family.
But this severe, centuries-long inbreeding led to documented medical issues.
It did. Rutledge found notes from the late and very respected Dr. William Shippen of Philadelphia, who had consulted on the family. Shippen mentioned a morbid sensibility of the nerves and fantasies of hearing.
A constitutional weakness.
That was the Attorney General's legal conclusion, which he framed in a clinical way. He posited a constitutional taint, physical or moral, predisposed both twins to simultaneous paroxysm.
So in his view, they were genetically wired for this kind of spectacular collapse.
It was another way of deflecting blame from the living. From Dr. Thorne, it was fated.
Which brings us to the cold legal heart of the memo, the plan.
Right. Rutledge immediately identifies the legal peril he's in. If Madeline was buried alive, the crime of premature interment attaches to Dr. Thorne and by abetment to Roderick Usher, who is now conveniently deceased.
And if she somehow escaped and then died accidentally?
It's still gross negligence reflecting directly on the attending physician. There's no good outcome for Dr. Thorne here.
But the political mandate overrode all of those legal concerns.
Completely. Rutledge feared, and he wrote this, that publicizing the horror, The fact that a leading Carolina physician buried a patient alive would fix an indelible stain upon Carolina medicine and inflame the already rampant public superstition.
He couldn't let that happen, so he drew up the official recommendation, the cover-up plan.
First, he instructed the coroner's jury, privately, to return a verdict of death by visitation of God, the dwelling being undermined by latent moisture for both siblings.
A visitation of God.
And notice, it omits all mention of the vault, the scratches, or the premature burial. This transforms medical negligence into a natural, unavoidable tragedy, an act of God.
Wait, hold on a minute. Rutledge, a senior legal official for the state, knows for a fact that a crime, or at least gross negligence, occurred. He has physical evidence of a forced egress from a coffin. But he actively conspires to turn it into an act of God just to protect the reputation of the state's medical community.
That's precisely what he did.
That is an incredible, almost breathtaking political manipulation. It's an unethical use of state power to censor a public health crisis.
It is. And his second step was removing the primary source of the truth, Dupin.
What did he do about him?
He recommended offering Dupin passage to France under a seal of confidentiality. He acknowledges in the memo that Dupin's tale is sincerely delivered, but it's dangerously inflammatory. It fans the flames of superstition he's trying to extinguish.
So pay him off and ship him out.
Essentially. Third, they had to physically erase the memory from the landscape.
The house itself.
Yes. Level the mansion forthwith and plant the ground with quick-growing loblolly pine to remove the eyesore and the temptation for gossip.
Plant trees over it. Just wipe it from the map.
Exactly. And finally, the most extraordinary, self-serving part of the whole plan.
The 50-year seal.
The AG's file should be closed for 50 years, after which, he writes, historians may judge whether reason or unreason ruled in this affair.
So he punted the responsibility for historical judgment to a generation that would not be able to hold him accountable.
He kicked the can down the road by half a century. A brilliant, cynical move.
So while Rutledge is busy burying the truth in Charleston, the story is traveling. We have to transition up the coast to Philadelphia.
The intellectual heart of the newly formed United States.
And the medical elite there are gathering. But they're not there to judge Dr. Thorne. Their goal is different.
Completely different. They're there to understand the pathology and to prevent future disasters. This is a direct contrast to the political maneuvering happening in Charleston. The Philadelphia College of Physicians viewed the Usher tragedy not as a unique, isolated horror, but as a severe, systemic threat to the credibility of the entire American medical profession.
If people can't trust doctors to know if you're dead or not, the whole system falls apart.
That's the fear.
So this meeting they hold, it was an assembly of American medical giants.
It really was. An extraordinary meeting of the curators, held just over 2 weeks after Roderick's death, on October 28, 1788, right in the hall of the Anatomy Theater.
And the attendee list is a who's who of late 18th century medicine.
You have Dr. Benjamin Rush, the president of the college. You have Dr. Caspar Wistar, the professor of anatomy. Dr. William Shippen, Jr., the chair of midwifery. And significantly, Jonathan E. Dupin, the sole witness, was present as a guest.
Dupin made it to Philadelphia.
He did. His testimony was considered vital.
And Dr. Rush, he set the tone immediately.
He did. He stated that the Charleston narratives demand the sober scrutiny of science, lest superstition engulf the credit of American medicine. They feared a return to the Dark Ages if physicians couldn't definitively certify death.
So what did they review?
The secretary read the compiled affidavits. That included the AG's sanitized report from South Carolina, Dupin's published interview, and critically, the sheriff's report from Charleston confirming the empty vault.
So the college knew she wasn't in the coffin.
They knew. Which placed the matter firmly in the realm of medical failure and not just rumor or superstition.
And Dupin testified in person.
He did. He confirmed Thorne's initial diagnostic failure. He told them Thorne felt no pulse for the space of an hour, which seems to be an exaggeration on his part, or maybe a misremembering of what he'd said earlier.
Or maybe Thorne did check for longer than 30 seconds. The sources conflict a bit.
They do. But Dupin was adamant on one point. He insisted that he himself perceived a faint tremor of the eyelid just as the coffin lid was closing.
The one sign of life that was ignored.
The one. The college also detailed her clinical history, pulled from Roderick's papers. Lifelong spectral sensitiveness.
What does that mean?
An extreme sensitivity to light, sound, even tastes. An inability to tolerate musical instruments above mezzo-piano. And of course, those strange spells.
The ones where she would.
She would lay stiff as marble, yet registered the passage of time. This detailed clinical picture pointed strongly for them toward a severe case of catalepsy.
And Dr. Shippen, who had consulted for the family, he had seen something like this before.
He had. He provided a terrifying parallel case to illustrate the danger. A Miss A.B. of Germantown from 1783.
What happened to her?
She had been interred for 3 days before grave robbers who were attempting to steal her jewelry inadvertently revived her while trying to get a ring off her finger.
My God. She came back to life on the surgeon's table, essentially.
She did. She only survived for an hour, but in that hour, she confirmed their worst fears. She stated she had been conscious but immured.
Conscious but immured. Aware of everything.
Fully aware, but trapped inside a paralyzed body, unable to signal that she was still alive. This testimony terrified the assembly and led Shippen to propose the official term for what they believed happened to Madeline, cataleptic syncope.
And they didn't just rely on testimony. They had anatomical proof.
Dr. Wistar provided it. He exhibited a preserved sample showing the intercostal muscles in rigor.
The muscles between the ribs.
Exactly. Demonstrating how respiratory motion could become completely imperceptible, thus proving the physiological possibility of Dr. Thorne's error. It wasn't magic. It was medicine they didn't fully understand yet.
So after hearing all this, Dr. Rush concluded the discussion on diagnosis with a general recommendation.
He did. He recommended that physicians must, from now on, maintain a statutory interval of 72 hours and apply ammonia salts to the nostrils before declaring death. No more 30-second checks.
A 3-day waiting period, that's a huge change.
A monumental shift in practice. And they formalized their findings into 3 resolutions intended to reform medical practice across the entire Union.
What was Resolution A?
Resolution A was the official medical acceptance. The alleged interment of Miss Usher, while yet living, though not proven, is consonant with known pathological phenomena, basically. We believe this can happen.
And Resolution B was the practical part.
That was the creation of the Philadelphia Protocol, a set of mandated standards to be circulated to every single practitioner in the nation. These were specific and designed to prevent any hasty declaration of death.
And this protocol went beyond just waiting. It required active testing.
Very active. It required practitioners to check the pulse at the carotid artery in the neck, the radial in the wrist, and the femoral in the thigh for not less than 5 minutes.
5 minutes. A huge increase from Thorne's 30 seconds.
And that's not all. They also mandated the mirror test for respiration to be conducted over a period of 10 minutes.
And if there was still any doubt.
If doubt persisted, more aggressive, even painful tests were required. The introduction of a tobacco smoke, please.
There's tobacco smoke. Okay.
It's an enema, a tobacco smoke enema. The idea was that the shock and irritation of it would be enough to force a respiratory or muscular reaction in the patient, confirming whether or not they were truly dead.
That's intense.
Or a slightly less intense option, tickling the nostrils with a feather. The point was to provoke an involuntary response.
So they're creating a new standard of care, and Resolution C was about putting the force of law behind it.
Exactly. A committee was formed to draft legislation for the General Assembly of Pennsylvania, criminalizing burial before compliance with this new protocol. They wanted to give it teeth.
But the scientific inquiry went even deeper. They had physical evidence.
They did. Dupin presented it to them. The blood-stained inner shroud of Miss Usher, which he had recovered from the scene. Dr. Wistar took possession of it for microscopic examination.
And what was Wistar's goal with that? What was he looking for?
His goal was incredibly advanced for the time. He wanted to ascertain whether the erythrocytes, the red blood cells, exhibited the globular integrity of circulating blood or the fragmentation of postmortem extravasation.
Okay, can you translate that for us? What does that actually mean?
Simply put, he was trying to figure out if the blood that stained the shroud was spilled while Madeline was still alive with her heart pumping and blood circulating, or if it was just leakage that happened after her body had actually died inside the coffin.
So if the cells were intact, globular.
It meant she was alive when she bled. She was struggling. If they were fragmented and broken down, the bleeding was post-mortem. It was essentially an 18th century forensic analysis aimed at fixing the exact hour of her final demise.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And what happened to Dupin?
The college subsidized his passage to France, thanking him for his service to science and society. For them, he was a vital source of data, even if the Attorney General in Charleston just wanted him silenced.
Okay, so now we have to return to Charleston, because the Attorney General's meticulously planned cover-up was already starting to fail.
It was. Rutledge had ordered a quiet, secret re-exhumation, but the public discovery, which was detailed in the South Carolina Gazette on October 24th, confirmed everyone's worst fears. The evidence of Madeline's struggle could not be contained.
The moment that vault was publicly opened, the whole latent moisture theory just evaporated. The physical facts were simply too visceral, too undeniable.
They were. The public exhumation occurred at 5 o'clock ante-meridian, still under the cover of a dark fog rising from the Cooper River. Architect Hext guided the company to the low granite chamber, which was now partially exposed by the mansion's collapse.
And the first thing they saw.
The first undeniable piece of evidence was the iron door to the crypt. It was formerly sealed with fresh mortar, but now it stood ajar.
Ajar. And how it was opened was the critical part.
Critically, its hasp was twisted outward as by violent agency from within. This was not a thief breaking in, this was someone desperately breaking out.
And the interior of the vault confirmed the struggle.
It did. The coffin was open, the lid was just tossed to one side, and the interior was empty, save for that blood-stained linen, the very piece of the shroud that would end up in Dr. Wistar's lab in Philadelphia.
The Gazette reported a forensic detail that must have just shocked the public.
It did. They reported scratches, deep and irregular, that furrowed the lead lining of the coffin. And the foreman of the work crew, a man named Samuel Poyas, testified that the scratches were of recent making, the metal bright wear-torn.
Bright wear-torn, meaning fresh.
Fresh. She was alive, she struggled, and she had somehow escaped the tomb.
What was the immediate reaction to this discovery?
It was immediate terror. 2 of the six laborers on the scene immediately declared the place haunted and fled, refusing to stay even when the sheriff offered them double wages.
So for the general populace, this event had officially transcended mere crime and entered the realm of the supernatural.
Absolutely. And then we have the crucial testimony from Mr. Cuffey, a free black watchman. He deposed on oath about what he saw that night.
What did he see?
He said, "About the 2nd hour after midnight, I heard a rumble like thunder underground. And thereafter a white figure passed through the gateway, making a low, mournful cry. Being unarmed, he didn't pursue her."
The 2nd hour after midnight. That timestamp is vital.
It is. If Roderick died near midnight and Cuffey saw her 2 hours later, that means Madeline survived her terrifying ordeal long enough to physically walk out of the ruins of her home.
Dr. Thorne must have been confronted with this.
He was, publicly. And while he maintained his original certification of death, he did concede the possibility of cataleptic revival during the interval between interment and final sealing of the tomb.
He's trying to cover himself? But what about the door?
He offered no hypothesis for how a revived, weak person could have forced open a barred iron portal. He couldn't explain it, which just highlighted the logical impossibility of his claim. It didn't make sense.
And the public scene at the ruins.
Public hysteria peaked quickly. A crowd of about 300 people gathered, and a Methodist preacher started haranguing the assembly, attributing the events to divine reproof of aristocratic pride.
And of course, the opportunists came out.
Of course. A sailor was there, producing fake shroud material, trying to sell it to the gawkers.
And the rumors started flying.
Fantastical rumors. Fishermen off Fort Johnson claimed they saw a female clothed in white walking upon the tide at dawn, soon enveloped in mist. A half-exposed tomb, and a river thick with fog. It was the perfect scene for mass hallucination, even if the physical facts confirmed she was simply a missing person.
So what was the sheriff's official response to all this?
His initial response was to treat this as a manhunt for a potentially dangerous, disoriented person. He ordered the vault closed back up and dispatched a rider to Columbia to request bloodhounds from the state penitentiary.
They were going to hunt for her like an escaped convict.
That was the plan. And the initial reward posted on the exchange was for $20.
$20? That seems low.
It was quickly deemed inadequate. The official search accelerated dramatically on November 1st with the issuing of a massive Admiralty Court broadside.
A public poster.
Yeah.
And this broadside had a very careful, very mitigating title, didn't it?
It did. It was titled, "Escape of a Lunatic, Supposed Dead, and Recovery of Missing Corpse." Notice the framing.
Yes, they are attempting to define her as insane, a lunatic, rather than as, a vengeful spirit or a ghost.
They're trying to medicalize it to control the narrative. And the reward was huge.
How much?
£100 sterling for her safe delivery alive, and £50 for positive intelligence of her remains.
And they wanted her found quickly.
Desperately. To incentivize speed, they offered Dia BLE the sums, £200 total, if she was produced within 14 days. This shows how desperate the government was to recover the body and with it, the evidence.
And the physical description on the poster was extremely detailed.
Incredibly so. 5 feet 4 inches, slender, extremely pale, dark auburn, hair likely disheveled, and gray eyes that were described as unusually luminous. Her clothing was a white woolen shroud, torn and bloodstained at the bosom and wrists.
They even provided identifying marks.
A small scar behind her left ear, and a family signet ring on the third finger of her right hand. They wanted a positive identification.
And the poster included a caution, a warning.
It did. It stated she was believed to labor under mania or melancholic delusion. Citizens were ordered to secure her by gentle means and furnish blankets, cordial, and immediate medical aid. They were treating her as a patient, not a monster.
And there were penalties for not complying.
Yes, the penalty section warned against harming or concealing her, which confirms that the authorities officially, at this point, considered her a living, if mentally incapacitated person.
So here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. The Usher tragedy wasn't just confined to the Cooper River Bluff. It became a massive financial disaster.
It did. It rippled all the way back up to Philadelphia, to the merchants and underwriters, proving that Roderick Usher's signature was still causing chaos even after his death.
He was a major investor. His death and the destruction of his property immediately triggered a fight over insurance liability.
And this wasn't a small policy. It was the largest single risk exposure for one particular Pennsylvania company.
Which company?
The Mutual Assurance Company of Pennsylvania. And their exposure was immense. 18,000 pounds sterling on a massive shipment of Carolina Brightleaf tobacco that was warehoused in Antwerp.
18,000 pounds. A fortune.
A huge fortune, and the company immediately tried to use the Charleston cover-up to avoid paying out.
How did they do that?
Their counsel argued for repudiation based on Policy Clause 14. This clause accepts loss occasioned by war, civil commotion, or act of God.
An act of God. And their proof was?
They cited the Attorney General's private term, a providential undermining by latent moisture. They tried to classify the structural failure as an act of God to get out of the claim.
So the insurance company tried to use the political lie, the latent moisture theory from Rutledge's memo, to avoid paying a massive claim.
But Mr. John Dunlap, who was representing the estate's Philadelphia factors, he fought back hard.
What was his argument?
Dunlap was sharp. He called the moisture claim a fiction. He argued the true cause of the collapse was, quote, the infirmity of an ancient pile.
Meaning the house was just old and falling down.
Exactly. Badly maintained and structurally defective. He argued this was predictable structural failure, not an act of God, and therefore the company was liable for any related losses.
What did the insurance directors decide?
After 2 hours of deliberation, they were cautious. They resolved to suspend the final settlement until sworn affidavits of actual damage could reach port from Europe.
So they kicked the can down the road.
They did. But they advanced 2,000 pounds immediately for burial costs and, quote, preservation of the deceased's commercial character.
That sounds like a PR move.
It was a critical move to protect their own reputation in the market. They didn't want to look like they were abandoning a major client's estate. And they did one more thing.
What was that?
They commissioned an independent survey of the Cooper River site. It would be controlled by the company, but billed to the Usher estate.
So the insurance company decided they couldn't trust the politically motivated report from Charleston.
They needed their own objective facts on what really caused the collapse. They weren't buying the latent moisture story without proof.
And the wider market reacted instantly to all this uncertainty.
Instantly. Tobacco prices for Carolina Leaf fell 4.25% before noon. They only recovered slightly on rumors that a French house, Fouchard, might purchase the entire Antwerp consignment as is, where is.
The market was treating the Usher tobacco as tainted, cursed almost.
The superstition infected the maritime trade directly. Shipbrokers reported 3 captains refusing charters that bore the Usher mark, alleging that ill luck sticks to the brand.
The name Usher had become commercially toxic.
Associated with disaster. And the financial peril wasn't limited to overseas trade. The Usher mills on the James River, which were pledged as collateral for another loan.
How big was that loan?
A further 7,000 pounds from the Bank of Virginia, and those mills were now in jeopardy.
So the bank moved to foreclose.
The bank announced that foreclosure proceedings would proceed with decency but dispatch to protect their massive investment. They weren't waiting around.
This even became a topic for sermons.
It did. The Reverend Dr. William White used the tragedy as a moral lesson, exhorting merchants to distinguish between legitimate business hazards and the presumptuous stretching of credit upon the frailties of mortality.
The lesson was clear. Don't gamble on human fragility.
And the mercantile intelligencer concluded that Roderick Usher's signature, which was once good for unlimited credit, had now become a memento mori, a powerful reminder of death and ruin pinned to every counting house wall in Philadelphia.
So now we arrive at the final official verdict, delivered nearly a month after the tragedy.
We do, and the coroner's jury verdict really shows the success of the Attorney General's efforts. They managed to incorporate just enough of the truth to satisfy the scientific questions, but they framed it politically to avoid any criminal liability.
The final verdict was rendered on November 7th at the Exchange Building, and it was published the next day in the City Gazette. This document is just a masterpiece of legal maneuvering designed to close the file forever.
It truly is.
So for Roderick Usher, what was the verdict?
For Roderick, the jury ruled the cause of death was acute cardiac syncope, induced by extreme mental agitation and terror, which was heightened by the collapse of the dwelling. And they formally found no evidence of poison, wound, or felony.
That verdict is brilliant political theater.
It is. It acknowledges Dupin's testimony of terror, but it anchors the legal cause of death to the collapse of the dwelling, which, by the Attorney General's decree, was caused by latent moisture.
The non-culpable explanation.
Exactly. No one is at fault.
For Madeline Usher, though, the verdict required a much more complex sequence of events.
It did. They certified her as dead on October 11th, but then they acknowledged that subsequent events proved she was in a state of cataleptic suspension.
So they admitted she was alive.
They admitted she revived, partially freed herself, and sustained injuries of which she afterward died. This is a crucial concession. They're admitting the premature interment and the subsequent struggle.
But what about the missing body? How did they explain that?
They addressed the missing body by concluding that, since the corpse was not recovered, it was presumed to have been carried to sea by the ebbing tide through the broken foundations of the house.
Carried out to sea. A final, definitive, and completely untraceable disposition.
A perfect way to close the book.
So the final manner of death was ruled.
What?
Misadventure, aggravated by premature interment.
And what happened to Dr. Thorne?
Dr. Thorne received a censure for negligence, but no criminal presentment was recommended because the person most responsible, Roderick Usher, who insisted on the quick burial, was deceased.
So Thorne escaped the gallows. He just received a public rebuke, a slap on the wrist.
He did. The system protected its own.
And the jury made some recommendations to the legislature to prevent this from happening again.
They did. They directly addressed the systemic failures. First, they urged a law requiring a 48 hours delay before burial when any doubt of death existed.
Which echoes the core idea of the Philadelphia Protocol. It does. It shows the ideas from Philadelphia were already filtering down. Second, they recommended that all vaults within the city limits be immediately inspected for secure fastening.
A direct response to Madeline's powerful, destructive escape from her own crypt.
Absolutely. And finally, the most visible public measure.
Getting her to the site.
Clear the site of the late Usher house, which they described as dangerous and of evil repute, and convert it into a public walk for the health and morale of the citizenry.
And the governor went along with this.
He immediately accepted the verdict. He directed the Surveyor General to mark off the ground for the new public walk, which was to be named Harmony Row.
Harmony Row. The irony.
It's thick, isn't it? And he explicitly forbade any future building on that spot, lest the memory of these sad events trouble the peace of the city.
So the entire official record, when you look at it, is a tightly woven fiction. The horrific truth, the fresh blood on the nail beds, a forced iron door, a political conspiracy, it was all sealed away in the AG's memo.
While the public narrative was plastered over with the placid name Harmony Row and the comfortable, convenient lie of latent moisture.
So what does this all mean? When you piece it all together from these disparate sources, the Usher catastrophe becomes this profound document of 18th century medical fear. It proves that the terror of premature burial was real enough to prompt genuine medical reform across the new nation.
And the most striking details are Madeline's specific clinical history, that hypersensitivity and the rigid cataleptic spells that made her the perfect victim of a negligent or overwhelmed doctor. And then you have the specific scientific intent of Dr. Wistar's blood analysis, trying to use this nascent forensic science to fix the hour of bleeding and settle the life or death question once and for all.
And for me, it's the sheer audacity of the Attorney General's plan to defer judgment for 50 years. He was betting that a future generation could handle the truth better than his own. And then there's the immediate commercial consequence, which transformed the Usher signature into a financial memento mori, a reminder that decay, whether it's physical or financial, could strike at any time.
And just think about this. The authorities named the site of that collapsed haunted mansion Harmony Row to suppress its memory. If the AG sealed that file for 50 years, which he did, until 1838, what did the historians find when they finally learned that the true cause of death was not damp soil, but a woman driven to a frantic egress from her own coffin whose body was potentially floating somewhere on the Cooper River? And did the planting of all those loblolly pines ever truly silence the memory of the House of Usher?